Hello, welcome to the third of my Benzo Diaries. This time I'm going to be talking about side effects, something I'm only too aware of as a result of taking this poison. First thing I'd like to say about side effects is that they blur the lines between what your original symptoms was, or were, or are, what the medication itself causes. So in my case, I was already suffering from a depressive illness, and actually the regime that I was put on, the so-called cutting regime to get me off benzodiazepines, actually made me feel more ill than I'd ever done in my life. And I alluded to that in my first diary when I talked about having attempted to take my life in May, and many months of leading up to that. What I didn't do was go into much detail. I'm going to go into some detail about the actual side effects that these cause. They can range from physical side effects, like being constantly thirsty. In my case, I get a rash when I come into contact with hot water, which spreads across my back and across my torso, and that has to be dealt with by using emollients. So I'm applying yet more things. I mean, the amount I must cost the NHS in prescriptions is just unreal, but it's hardly my fault. I didn't sign up for this addiction when the medication I was originally prescribed was first given to me. But I'm bloody angry, I'm still on it. So I was talking about rashes, complete loss of libido, which frankly isn't that important because I'm not in a relationship, not surprisingly. Other side effects, anxiety, and in my case, like I said, crippling depression. The only way I can explain it is when I got switched from the more powerful sedative to the weaker one, which I'm now taking, which is Valium. Most of you watch this diary will probably have experienced a bereavement of some kind in your lives and lost somebody close. And if you can imagine feeling that bereavement every minute of every day for month after month after month, you have no control over crying or no appetite, just feeling absolutely desperate. Like I said, when I was on my original benzodiazepine, the more powerful one, perversely I was actually in better health. I never needed the crisis team. I was able to do permitted work. When I got switched over, the regime, my body couldn't tolerate it because, and people don't know this, just because two drugs are from the same family, it doesn't mean that they affect your brain in the same way. So the Valium I'm taking now affects different areas of my brain that the Klonopin that I was taking before was previously affecting. And what that does is it sends your brain into complete scramble. It doesn't know what's going on. There's things inside your head called neurotransmitters, and I'm going to try and avoid any scientific terminology because it is quite confusing. Those things go absolutely haywire, and in extreme cases, or according to the manufacturers, in extreme cases, but it's a lot more common. Believe me, I've met people and spoken to people and heard online from people who've experienced similar things. I've got one poor lady who's a friend of mine who's down to a fraction, just under a milligram of Valium, and she's having to now take it in liquid form and cut it in the smallest amounts you can imagine, and it's absolute agony for the poor woman. It's made her agoraphobic, which is something that's affected me in the past. It completely changes your quality of life, and what is worse is that when I made the switch, the best way to say it is if I was undergoing treatment for something else, a consultant would sit down with you and say, this treatment might affect you in certain ways. It might have these benefits, but it might have these side effects. No consultant ever sat down with me and told me what the pitfalls of making the changes were. In fact, they were quite bullish that it would be an easy process and that I would suffer not very much at all, which actually contradicts all the information that's on the NICE guidelines, which is available online, and also the information that you can see on these things. This is information about venlafaxine, the antidepressant, and this is information, so-called information, about diazepam. And I'll quote from it here. The medication shouldn't be stopped suddenly. You should reduce the dose slowly. You experience the following withdrawal effects: depression, nervousness, difficulty in sleeping, irritability, sweating, upset stomach or diarrhea. The symptoms you are being treated for can come back worse than before. I don't need to say anything more. That's, apart from the diarrhea and the stomach problems, that's exactly what has happened in my case. And I feel absolutely gutted and betrayed by the NHS. I know it's treason, it's almost considered treason to criticise the National Health Service, but there are people working within it that are frankly not fit to practice, and I'm living proof that there is real human suffering caused as a result of these kinds of should we be kind and call them mistakes. If people who know more about these things than me actually did their research, then perhaps people wouldn't be in this situation. And the other thing that gets my goat is that, to be honest, the night when I was given these things in the first place, I would have been better off being sent out of the hospital with a load of crack cocaine or smack or drugged up on alcohol, because there's a lot more help out for the people who choose an addiction. I never signed up to anything like this. You know, I didn't sign on the dotted line and say I'll be happy to be dependent on these for the rest of my life. There are people who are getting help that, frankly, that I should be getting. Because this is not my fault. This is not my doing. And I have no choice but to take these things. Because if I don't, the consequences are severe. They range from fits, convulsions. Stopping suddenly can actually, in some cases, cause death. And side effects don't get much more serious than that. So, yeah, I'm struggling to do this one because I'm so angry and frustrated a bit about the time that has been robbed. I use the word robbed, stolen away from me. Well over 7 years so far. I should also point out, and I never mentioned this before, I was given tranquilizers as a 17-year-old by my doctor in South Wales because my mum has paranoid schizophrenia, and she used to regularly create scenes, shall we say, down there. And I don't want to go into them on my upbringing, but eventually I came into contact with the doctors and they just sent me away with these pills. Again, back in the 80s, I know things were different then, but I was just given these and told not to come back, basically. That's what passes for care. Then, sad thing is, fast forward on 30 odd years, I don't see much change. But that's going to be the subject of my next diary. It's going to be about what my prescription is for making this situation better for people that are in far worse situations than me, and how I hope that people who have been negligently treated can begin to start fighting back and reclaim some of their lives, get the apologies and, where necessary, financial recompense for, as they would do if they were the victim of a mistake. Someone took the wrong kidney out or did something like that, they would be compensated for it. The same principle should apply for when people make these kind of ghastly errors, because the consequences are massive for people, and this cannot continue. I don't want to keep doing. I'm not going to do many of these because they're very difficult to do, but I'm not prepared to tolerate the shit that's been dumped on me by these people. right, I think 10 minutes is quite enough of anyone's time. In a few days, like I said, I'll talk about what I think should be done in order to address this situation. I might even have smartened up and had a haircut by then. I'll speak to you another time.